drive was good down from Waco.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
hot. Pulled over a couple of times and rehydrated, but made it pretty good.
Yeah. Hey, you looking good. I was saying it before, like, you're definitely looking good. Got the Aruka shirt going.
Well, my wife body builds,
Oh, okay.
and so I try to keep up as best I can, which I can't do, but it kind of keeps me a little more active.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's if there's any good, it's because of that, I would think.
For sure. But yeah, as I was saying to you last night, so I'm rocking the Baylor shirt just because obviously not only did we work together at Baylor, but obviously I want to shout out to Vic Valori, his crew, and Eric Rash and Mike Wenger for the shirt. But just sort of almost like celebrating the start of football again.
Good guys.
Yeah.
All of them. Be pulling for them.
Yeah, everyone's excited. Like everywhere I go, like whether it be on Facebook or X, everyone's like, oh my God, we can't wait for football to be back. And you have all the memes of like people crying, going, oh, it's a great time of the year. So yeah, just celebrating the start of football season.
It's kind of hard to believe.
The year's going so quick.
It's already starting again. It's, I don't know, time just seems like it's accelerating, and I'm excited because obviously my favorite sport, for a lot of reasons, but anyway, it's almost here.
Oh, for sure. You're right. Time is going quick. So in that case, like you might have remembered, like we had a conversation back in, and we had many conversations when we were at Baylor, but like back in 2018, I remember vividly asking me a question. I actually talk about this quite a bit when we were like, hey, Michael, if you had like a technology or a test or a process that you would do and you would have to only use one forever, what would it be? Do you remember what I said there?
Oh man, that's been a long time ago.
Oh yeah, but still.
And you were talking about how I look, but up here it might not be working as fast as it used to. You're gonna have to.
Yeah, I got you. So basically, what I said was that, and I thought about it, and I was like, well, you know what? Us being in the data age, but I was like, I would use the wellness questionnaire. And you're like, well, why is that? It's like, well, no matter what tech out there, what test you can do, you're never going to get as much honest and accurate feedback than what you will from the athlete itself.
Right.
And at the time, you were like, I like that. But do you still, what are your thoughts on it now? Like, 7 years later and what you've been doing since then, do you still have a similar view as to like an agreement or disagreement in that sort of statement?
No, I would very much agree with that. I think most athletes are honest. And in regards to their fitness level and health level, I think most people are honest because you want to maximize both of those. And so I think questionnaires in that population group, I think they're good. If you can't depend on the individual to tell the truth, then they're never going to be accurate. But I do think, that would be certainly in my top three.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yeah, and it's another thing that you told me about when we were going over like the NFL interviews that I had last year, and you're like, this really stood out to me, and this will lead into what you're doing with Aruka, because quite exciting. This has been something that you've been doing for a little while. But like you said to me, doesn't matter what you do, you got to know your truth. Yeah. So what does that for you? Like you obviously have a bit of an opinion about that. So like,
right.
What does that mean for you to know your truth?
Well, I think it's very, very important in the generation that we're currently living in to always keep as your anchor that you're after the truth. And the truth about that is this. Sometimes you can't find the absolute truth. None of us can in every realm. However, we're living in such an age in which through social media, through the internet, various platforms, YouTube, whatever you want to call them, there's a lot of people saying a lot of things that are not true. And so you can't always depend on facts either, as we've discussed, Mike, because sometimes the facts unfortunately, due to human nature, have been tweaked.
Well, it's almost like people have gone like, facts used to be facts, but now people have made opinion into fact.
Correct.
So it's all like skewed as to like, what is actually good out there. And then you get the certain practitioners, strength coaches, athletic trainers, whatever have you, and they're sort of like slamming those opinions as facts with their own opinions as facts. So there's like this never ending, brutal cycle of like, well, who do we trust? Who do we listen to? You know what I mean?
It's couldn't agree more. It's very interesting. If you stop and think about it, I'm a big logic guy. And I think a lot of people are. But we've got more knowledge right now, especially with the advent of AI, than any person can accumulate or assimilate. So we don't really need more knowledge. What we need is wisdom. And it's very interesting. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, and I like to study ancient languages. And in the Hebrew that the Torah or the Old Testament was written in, it's very interesting because the word wisdom and the word skill are the same word. They're just, if they're translated in regards to a ruler or a prince or a king, it's wisdom. If it's a craftsman, it's skill. But essentially what it means is you practice the truth and you practice it very well. So it's not, again, just about knowing the truth. It's what you're doing with the truth that makes the difference. We're not a nation of doers anymore. And certainly we're not doers in regards to fitness and athletics. And some people may say, well, that doesn't make sense because I'm in shape, I'm fit. But the health of our nation says differently.
Yeah, is that sort of what led you down the road? Obviously, you've got a lot of experience. You're a Hall of Fame strength coach, being in the industry doing this for 40 plus years and whatnot. But Aruka has only been part of your life as a concept company for the last few years. Would you say that like Aruka was part of who you always were as a strength coach, but didn't put a name to it?
Aruka is a Hebrew word, and it is one of the words used for health. But it means to be rebuilt or restored. That's what the word literally means. And so the reason I chose that is when I came up in the mid-'80s in the strength and conditioning profession, and it was the early ages of that, as you well know.
Well, I was only in '89, baby. I'm not that old.
Yeah, well, but you looked at the ancient scrolls.
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
At some of that stuff. But at any rate, you wore a lot of hats.
Yeah, for sure.
And one thing that I did very early to answer your question, I was involved in rehabilitation and return to play programs since the mid-'80s. And I've worked for some great people. Dr. James Andrews was our team physician at Alabama. Worked with some really great physical therapists, athletic trainers, doctors over the years with six different teams in the NFL. And I always was drawn to that. Mm-hmm. And so the last few years I spent in the league, I was a director of player wellness. I wasn't really a coach. I was in an administrative position, and I oversaw that aspect along with medical, athletic training, analytics, nutrition, and performance. And what we did, Michael, is we implemented a very integrative form of health management for our players. And it was fairly unique. It's not that we did it better than anybody, because I would never say that, because there's some great teams like the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, for sure.
Sam Ramsden there does a great job. And there are many other teams the same way. But it was unique in that we incorporated a very holistic form of health management, because health is a lot more than just nutrition, exercise, and restoration, which is what commonly it gets lumped into.
Yeah.
But we've got a lot of good facts now. Health is a state of being. And what goes on the inside of us influences the physical manifestation, even disease. And we know that now. So it led me down a road, and I was very, very fortunate, because over the years I had been able to develop a great network, community of professionals, doctors, nutritionists, therapists, analytics people, all those arenas. And you're only as strong as your community. And so, it wasn't anything novel I was doing, because there's nothing new under the sun. But what I was just doing is bringing in and trying to create this integrative network. For instance, if we needed an ultrasound and we needed a doctor or a radiologist that knew how to read ultrasound, those people are hard to find. A lot of people are trained to read ultrasound, for instance, in pediatrics and maternity. And however, when you talk about sports injuries, it's hard to get somebody who can read the image. And it's great because seeing an ultrasound is like watching a video, as you well know, whereas an MRI is like taking a static picture. And so it's little things like that make a huge difference in that world. And that's kind of what led me down this Aruka trek.
Yeah, and that's a good answer, because from what you and I have spoken about over the years is that I say this to the athletes that I work with, is in this day and age, your body is your money. Without your body, you're not getting paid.
Right.
You can be the best athlete in the world, but if you're always injured, we're having discussions with people right now where it's like, hey, particularly in the NIL situation with college, and you got guys, recruits that are coming in and eventually going to be paid, $700,000-800,000. Not everybody, but there's going to be people that are going to be millionaires in college. It's like, well, why wouldn't you try and vet those individuals on a health standpoint? Because if you're going to come into our building and basically we're going to give you X amount of $1 million and you're going to be sitting on the sideline, well, you're now in the professional environment, right? So what we do at Valor, and what I've been doing most of my career, is how can we put a focus on movement quality? And obviously it's accelerated now because I work for a motion capture company, but I've always been on the view of build your foundations, build from the ground up, right? Because what do you do? We're running sports predominantly. Without your legs, you can't do anything. Correct. So more efficient individuals. And we also say as well that in the world of football that you and I also live in, obviously you've lived in it a lot longer, you would know this more than me, but football guys are super skilled, highly skilled, some of the world's best, but as a mover, they're very poor, but their skill allows them to compensate for their poor movement. But then you have that breakdown over time because no one's fixing the issue, because it's like this mask, right? It's like when you win, every organization has issues, but then when you lose, they come to light. So again, being in a long-winded, scenario too, it's like, well, how do you go about pinpointing movement dysfunction and then going about to say the best ways to fix that in the environments that you've been in, knowing how high pressure they are?
Yeah, and as you well know, because this is your business, we're movement illiterate as a society. And what I mean by that is simply this. I think there are four major components to building an athlete, whether they're 11 or 12,
Yeah.
or whether they're 35. And the first and foremost is where we're the weakest, and that's skill mastery. And the reason I say that is I began to research movement skills back when I was with the Green Bay Packers in the mid-90s. And what I saw, Michael, is there's a guy, and I won't mention his name because it probably would embarrass him. He's a Hall of Fame defensive lineman. And he couldn't throw. And when he would throw a football, the guys laughed at him. So there's this skill paradigm in athletics in which movement skills, which there are 33 of those. Mm-hmm. Some people say they're 36. There are 12 that are absolutely what I call the movement skills for life. Every other skill dovetails off the 12. And what's happening is even great athletes, they're not learning these skills because think about this. The second area that creates an athlete is biomotor ability development. So strength, speed, range of motion, power, endurance, all of those things are only capacities. Because if you cannot take one of these capacities or a number of them at one time and express them through a skill, then there's two things that are going to happen. You're either going to underperform because you're going to have energy leaks.
Yeah.
Or secondly, you're going to create erosion, the movement dysfunction, and you're going to become subject to more pain, more more injury. And so being strong, being fast is an inert capacity that just lays there like a reservoir. It's actually good for very little because you have to have a skill, either a movement skill like we talked about, walking, running, sprinting, skipping, hopping, a fitness skill like squatting, lunging, hinging, rotating, bracing, or a sports skill, which is related, obviously. If you're a quarterback, I got to take a snap.
Yeah.
If I've got to take a 3-step drop. If I'm a basketball player, I've got to learn to shuffle and slide. I've got to be able to shoot a free. The sports skills. Because that's the paradigm. We are very heavy in biomotor ability development, and we are weak as water many times in skill mastery. And the reason is, the big reason is we've taken physical education out of our elementary schools.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, which we can talk about later, is what I call neurogenics.
Yeah, I had that on because that does fascinate me.
And then you got to have good coaching. But those are the four aspects of athleticism. But movement dysfunction is rampant, and it is erosive, and it is the reason we have a lot of sports injury, as you know. Like when we put together our injury risk analysis, just at the foot and ankle, there are 8 dysfunctions we look for. And I can honestly say, I've never graded anybody, and I've graded well over 100 of these since we developed them. And nobody's been clean. Mm-hmm. These 8 dysfunctions we look, and they're correctable.
But also, like, they stem from things up and down the chain that are also in dysfunction too.
Yes.
So what we've seen is that a very weak glute med will cause a lot of issues down the chain through internal rotation, through knee abduction moment. Obviously, DA, who's over here, he knows we work about this
It's a
all the
system.
time. Yeah. So once hip internal rotation pushes you into that, sorry, once you get pushed into hip internal rotation, even if it's excessive, the forces, the joint angles through the knee, whether it be into valgus or varus, and then it establishes that down into whether it be pronation or poor shin angle. So it's all linked. And I was going to talk about this later, but like you've brought it up now. Obviously, for me, being the token Aussie in America, or for most places that I go, right? Everyone's like, well, I want the Australian high performance model. And it's like, yeah, do I believe there are certain things in Australia and the UK that we do better in America? For sure. But my whole response is that you have to Americanize it when you bring it over, because every person that's brought something over in some fashion and verbatim brought it from, UK, Australia, and implemented it, it's failed because it's an Australian system trying to operate in an American culture. It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. But the one big thing that I have noticed is that the long-term athlete development framework over here does not exist. And it's very popular and has done a lot of really good things with youth development overseas. So my question to you is like, why do you think it's not worked here? Do you think it could work here, particularly if you Americanize it?
Oh yeah, I have no doubt. But what I would do, and yes, I've studied you guys' model, and in fact, I really, and this was going back into the 90s, was solid then. But I think to do it over here, you're going to have a couple of things that are outside the ability of a model to accomplish. The first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to reinstitute physical education. And there's no reason, with all the research that exists now, that cognitive processing improves with physical activity.
Sure.
It's inexcusable. We're just lazy, fat, and unmotivated as a society.
I mean, obviously the technology doesn't help, makes life easier.
Well, the tech has expounded it, but we don't have discipline anymore. And I'm sorry if that's offensive, but that's just the truth.
We're looking at you and your generation, PA.
It's really, and again, when I say that, I'm not slamming any individual, but at some point you have to recognize, guys, are we going to wake up, study history, look at what happens to societies?
We make the same failures over and over and over again.
Yeah, you cannot do that. So that's the first thing. We can't be afraid to make physical education part of the curriculum and actually mandate it with assessment scores that you have to pass before you get out of high school. Now, think about the kickback that's going to get.
Yeah, for sure.
But in answer to your question, if you learn a skill incorrectly, it all goes back to skill. If you're taught incorrectly one of the 12 primary movement skills, then you're building on a faulty foundation, so you are going to have movement dysfunction. And I absolutely agree. It becomes a detective piece to figure out how to fix it. But detecting it is not that difficult if you just have to have the right eye for it.
Here's my question to you then. So there's this love affair with early specialization, which I disagree with. Again, coming from Australia, and we had to play multiple sports. So I played sports that I was terrible at, but in high school you had to play, 2 winter sports, 2 summer sports. I believe, the summer sports were like swimming and I forgot what the other ones, but then I did like soccer and athletics, as we call it. So there was only one sport that I wasn't very good at. But ultimately, you're in and around, and you're in the playground as well, playing all different other things, and you learn different skills by playing multiple sports, even if you later on specialize, right? So here's my question to you: is that do you find people that play multiple sports have more or less dysfunction than those that have basically that early specialization with one sport?
Well, there's no question. If you if you slot a kid too early, you're going to create a movement dysfunction issue unless they're participating in other activities on the side. Dr. James Andrews, who's retired now, but he's probably the most famous orthopedic surgeon to ever live. And again, I did return to play and rehab work under his athletes when we were at Alabama, and we're good friends. He's written an entire book about it.
Is he the same Andrews, like the Andrews Institutes and all sorts of stuff?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That puts a lot of context to it.
Yes. He was the founder of the Andrews Institute. I think he's 82 now. He's a great guy, a great human being. But he has a book entitled Any Given Monday. And it's a great book, but he traces early specialization as one of the prime causers of all the problems he dealt with. And this is a guy that was in it for a lot of years.
Yeah.
He was the guy. And so I don't think you can make it any clearer than he did. It's not good. And you rob a kid of athleticism if you slot them too early. Because you know this, Mike, athleticism really is just functionality. It's being functional at a given task or series of tasks that you execute with optimum efficiency. That's all athleticism is. So every individual on the planet should train like an athlete. Every single one, because it's about efficiency in the long run.
Yeah.
And we've lost sight of that. There's nothing wrong with looking good and bodybuilding. Like I said, my wife's in that. However, she does she's running the Boston Marathon. She's been a power lifter. She's been in martial arts.
She's putting all of us to shame.
She played college basketball. She was an Olympic swimmer. And so she was an unbelievable athlete, but there's a lot of cross sport to what you're saying, multi-sport activity that laid groundwork. So I think, to your point, that would have been the second thing I would have brought up is early specialization for children, bad move.
Yeah, no, and it's like the time that I was at Baylor, we had Ish Wainwright as one of our tight ends on the football team, and then he went eventually into the NBA. So there's plenty. Like Deion Sanders played football, and then obviously the most famous one, Bo Jackson, right?
Yes.
So and then you see that a lot of the football guys that come in the college environment, they have come even even some quarterbacks out there that have come from previous sports, and football wasn't their original sport. So there's definitely a pathway to that. It makes sense. But you also think because obviously, your worldview is quite holistic. You've traveled the world, you've seen different things, how they do things all over the world and whatnot. Do you think by other athletes mingling with other athletes from different sports, it allows them to at least wire themselves in a particular way? Because as you know, each sport around the world, or particularly in America, they all have different cultures. So if you talk to a football guy, they're going to get a very different vibe to a baseball guy or a basketball guy or a soccer guy or a female athlete. So you see that having an impact, not just on the physical side of things, but also on the mental and cognitive side of things?
I do if the person is observant, if he's cognitive of that. And actually, I've been around some of that and working with some really good basketball players and working with obviously some really good football players. But what I've observed, and I can't say this is a rule or a law, I'm just telling you what I've observed. Those guys always come back center to their ideology. they may pick some learning lessons up, and that's what you're hoping.
Yeah.
But in terms of ideology, they and to me, really and truly, that's really the driver, not just of what we're talking about today, but I'm a big believer that in the 21st century, nations, states, that may be where we live, but the real definer of who you line up with is its culture and ideology.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you don't hang out in different, because I do.
Yeah.
You have. And it's been good. But we also respect each other's culture and ideology. And the thing that scares me today is to disagree with somebody's culture or ideology is equivalent to hate.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, it was not like that. So there's been a definite shift, not for the better. And that happens in sports too. I don't understand why it exists, but I think it does exist.
Yeah. It's unfortunately, there's the good and the bad of that human nature, right? And
Correct.
as you know, through our relationship over the last almost 10 years, I'm a very big people person.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously,
Always have been.
well, yeah, we'll appreciate that. Obviously, like me being first generation, my mom and dad being born in Italy, that has given me, and maybe a bit of an attitude, bit of fire in the belly too, having that Italian fire. But I'm very big on the relationship piece, and going back through Aruka, the book, and you've almost got about 100 pages worth dedicated to the inner person and the relationship and the worldview, character, culture, spirituality, faith, all these sorts of things, which essentially are the cornerstone of who we are as people, right? So what is all that? And again, you're very well traveled. You told me you've been to Israel, Europe, all over the world. What does all that stuff mean to you about how we operate in our lives and also in the sports that we work in or compete in?
Well, I think you hit upon a key word, and that word is worldview. And I developed a worldview questionnaire. And here's why I did that. Think about this. If you're an administrator, or if you're a coach, or if you're working with a group of people, if you can come to know why somebody thinks the way they think, you're going to be a better coach to that person, because you're going to understand a lot of times before you say something or before you go into a particular realm, you're going to already know where that person sits. And I'm not saying everybody sits in a good place.
Yeah.
Some people would tell me, you don't sit in a good place, Kent. And they may be right. But there are 5 questions. Actually, the Worldview questionnaire is 25 questions. And you were talking about a wellness questionnaire. Well, I developed a Worldview questionnaire. And it's very simple. And I've seen, if you look at these 5 areas and you ask a person the right questions and they're honest, which most people have been honest in this when I'm giving it, you're going to know, okay, and you're going to respect, okay. And the question is this: what do you think about God? Some people would say this. Some people would say, well, I don't think he even exists. Okay, good. On to the next deal. Now, there are 5 questions there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about humanity? Why are we here? Who are you? What do you think about ethics?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about knowledge? And what do you think about health? And like I said, 25 questions. And the goal of the Worldview questionnaire is not to change, to evangelize somebody to my worldview. That's not what it is.
Mm.
I'm not a pastor, or I'm not a priest, or something like that. I'm a coach. I want to know why a person sees the world the way they do, because your worldview is the lens of reality you see and interpret the world through. It's the compass that you use to navigate your life with. It's your ideology.
Yeah.
And so I'm not afraid to talk about that. And I always tried, whether I gave somebody the assessment or not, sooner or later, of the thousands of men that I coached over the years, I wanted to get to know what made them tick, what motivated them, what made them angry, what turned them off. Because I knew I'd do a better job serving them. And that's what a coach should do, is serve his constituency. And so that was in the book, man, worldview, the inner person, your mind tells you what you think, your emotions tell you how you feel, but your will tells you what you want.
For sure. Have you found that like people that have an expansive worldview versus maybe someone that may have a little bit of a narrow worldview, do they think differently? Do they make good or better decisions? Do they have good or better communication skills, relationships? Like, is there like a correlation between all that?
There are a few correlations that I've actually looked at. And one correlation that I can tell you, and I actually mentioned this, a couple of them in the book, true leaders, there's certain characteristics they share in common. And they never tried to be leaders. They did not seek the position of leadership. Mm. They walked in a room and it just happened. And akin to that, most people who have faith in a higher power live on a much more even keel. Now, again, I'm only saying that from my observation, but I observed thousands of athletes over the years. If somebody wanted to know what my worldview was, I would share it with them. But I never wanted to press my worldview on somebody that had no interest in hearing it.
Yeah, I get that.
I wanted to respect where they were, and I may have totally disagreed with where they were. And many times you could sit down, if that person's disarmed and you're disarmed in the conversation, and there's no agenda but to have a healthy debate, then, hey, you get up, you shake hands, you hug each other. On Sunday, you're sweating together. You're, all those things. But we've just lost so much of the capacity to do that in our current environment.
Who are some of the like coaches and athletes that you found are the best leaders that you've ever worked with?
Let me couch that with some things they all shared in common, because I think it'll paint the context. True leaders never sought to be leaders. And that sounds like an enigma, but it's really not.
Is that through presence or actions?
Both. They had a character behind them that took care of all the actions.
I got you there.
True leaders that I experienced, they understood authority. And they saw leadership as not an opportunity to lord it over or govern somebody else. They saw leadership as an opportunity to come up under and lift and serve their teammates. True leaders, every single one of them, always had the capacity to laugh at themselves. They had a great sense of humor. They didn't take themselves too seriously.
That's actually a good one. I like that.
And there are 2 or 3 other that I won't take the time to go in right here, but some great leaders. Reggie White was a great leader. On the other end of the spectrum, Jim McMahon was a great leader. Totally different human beings, but they shared those traits.
Yeah.
Brett Favre learned a lot of his leadership skills from Jim McMahon, in my opinion. And it helped Brett later on in his career. A linebacker I coached, Scott Vegeta, great leader. Joe Thomas, the Hall of Fame offensive lineman, great leader. There's been so many.
Well, when I was obviously researching the people that you sort of work with, probably the biggest name that in terms of the current NFL right now that you work with back when he was a young pup, Andy Reid. Like obviously you see his trajectory after, when you work with him and now to where he is. Like, what do you think he's been able to do from what you know about him? And he obviously, you had him like, I think was like a testimonial for your book too. So you clearly have a special relationship there. And I saw here you got Russell Okung who done the forward of your book as well. So you maybe want to talk about him. But what are some of these people that you work with when they were younger and they were maybe, position coaches, assistant coaches, and now they're like shot up to the big time, if you will? Like, what have you noticed back then that doesn't surprise you to where they got now?
Well, Andy Reid is a very close personal coaching friend. And we were together in Green Bay. Families were tight. He's the best coach I ever worked with, period. And one thing that I admired about Andy, and he certainly fit the description of the leader protocol, that he was always taking notes. When Mike Holmgren was the head coach, and Mike he's the best head coach I ever worked for. Andy was an assistant, and John Gruden gets promoted somewhere else. Steve Mariucci gets promoted somewhere else. All of these guys that we came in with, they begin to get head jobs, and Andy's still there. Of course, I'm the strength and conditioning coach, so I'm not in that line. But Andy was patient. He didn't promote himself. And in the NFL, you have to understand there's 3 types of coaches. There's the coach that's really, really good on game day. Boy, they can make the strategic decision, and most of the time it's the right decision. And then there's the coach who is a great technician, who gets his players to be ready. They're ready for Sunday. And then there's the rare guy, that's good at both.
Yeah.
Andy was good at both. And you can see it even now watching him on the sideline. He's good at both. And that's why he'll be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know how long he wants to coach, but as good a coach as he is with the organization and with the quarterback he has, heck, I don't know what he's going to do, but he might want to ride that pony a
For
long
sure,
time.
Yeah.
But that, he was phenomenal.
Well, you said it before, like he's the best, in terms of like coach that you were around as a youngster to do what he did now, and having both those qualities. But obviously, for me on the strength and conditioning side, like, I'm on social media like we all are, and every year when it comes to bowl season in college or NFL season, you have the same thing that goes around. It doesn't have to just be in the NFL. We don't want to pick just football. Every sport, you always see the phrase, "Oh, this is the best staff in the country." Well, this is the best coach It's like, well, they can't all be good. You know what I mean? And I'm
Correct,
sure they
yeah.
are, but it's like they can't all be like, they're at the top of their game, or like, that's probably a fair one because you can be at the top of the game. But
Sure.
best in the country. It's like, well, you got like 1,000 strength coaches that are the best in the country. It's like far out. They can't all be good. I'm sure they are, but my whole point I want to bring that up is like in your mind, because you've been doing this for so long, is like the big question that we all want to know is what actually makes a good coach? Because there's the avenue of like, well, we don't have a say on wins and losses. I believe we do as a part of the high performance ecosystem, right? I believe we have a say, even if it's a little bit. Like, what makes a good coach in your mind, whether it be strength and conditioning, performance, tactical, technical, head coach? Like, how do we set ourselves apart as being like good coaches?
I think the first thing that I would say, and that's a very good question, Mike. The first thing I would say is they have a undeniable, legitimate love and care for their players, first and foremost. I know in the NFL, the locker room is very street smart. You're not going to BS those guys.
Yeah, it's like the rugby league banter in the locker room we had in Australia. It's very much like you got to be on your game all the time. They'll eat you alive otherwise.
It's kind of like I would envision. And when I was with the Chargers, we networked with the SEALs, and they would come out and work with our guys. It was great, but it's kind of how I envision their world is too.
Oh, it definitely is, yeah.
But at least in sport, those guys know if you really care about them or not.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. If you don't have that, you're not going to get buy-in from your athletes. So you're not going to be a good coach. It's hard to fake that over time. You can fake it initially, but over time, no. So I would start there. And then I would say a really good coach is a great technician and they know how to teach skill. They know how to prepare their team for competition. They know what it takes to restore the team. They're very intuitive in those areas. And then I would say that, a good coach does not promote themselves. Because again, to me, it always comes back to the team. And if you're a coach that's living out there promoting yourself, then some guys will say, okay, but if it's ongoing, number one, human nature being what it is, you begin to think you're a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I get that.
Than what you are.
Like that in our world, like that famous picture with Jimmy Radcliffe when they're celebrating on the stage and he's like, 50, 60 yards back just with his arms like soaking it all up. Sort of that being in the shadows, but the players will know about it.
Players notice that stuff, as you well know.
For sure.
And then I would say the other thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, they're great teachers. I've never known a really who I would consider a great coach that's not a great teacher. And I'm sure you would agree with that. But I think those are differentiations. A good coach got to know when to get out of the way. Good coaches understand it's all about the players and positioning them to go out and win the event, win the game, win the competition. And if you don't do a good job, you can be the cause of losing, but very seldom are you the cause of winning.
For sure. It's like, I always say this a lot, whether I say it on this podcast or I just say it in general, but when I first listened to Alva Mule, he did a podcast for the NCAA. he said basically like, we can basically do more harm than good as a program. So I think it's a very big like point to make, that we have to think that we're not as big as the result from our standpoint. Like we're not as important as what we think we are, right? That we're just part of the
Yeah,
process.
and when I think about that, and you guys are in the movement dysfunction and detection business, correction, which I am as well. So I know you would, tend to agree with this, but a lot of coaches drive movement dysfunction. And one of the primary examples is an overabundance of strength training. It's going to drive rigidity in the spine. And that metastasizes to the limbs eventually. The older athletes, there's three things I observed that they were losing it. They got rigid in their spine because the spine should be elastic.
Mm-hmm.
They began to lose their balance and they lost joint mobility. And so when those three things converge, it's bad. But we actually drive that with too much weight training. And I love weight training. The other thing we drive it in is, think about this with most athletic programs, 90% of the work output is done through the sagittal plane only. And yet when you're an athlete, you're moving through all three planes of motion. You're moving through the frontal plane, you're moving through the transverse or the rotational plane, and yet we spend 90% of the time training our athletes in sagittal plane motions. That in itself drives rigidity, in my opinion, based on my observations. So a well-meaning coach can actually drive the problem.
Yeah. And I get that. And like, one thing I did want to ask you though, obviously with all the experience that you've had, working with, like you said, thousands of athletes, and then you have, your own kids, right? Having their own athletic careers. Obviously, I work with Clay at Baylor, so he's probably the one that comes to mind the most. But it's like, have you had to scale back things as a coach with your kids, or have you been fully dialed into their athletic development? Like, have you been able to say, you know what, I trust that they're in good hands in the programs that they're at? Or do you just sort of itch and go, you know what, I know I have all this experience. Even though I trust those coaches, I just want to be a part of that. Like, where have you been at with that?
Well, it's been, I've been very blessed first. But it's been tough at times. Mm-hmm. I think you knew that before you answered me the question. But for instance, Clay was playing for a very good NFL team. He ended up going to the Super Bowl. And he called me one Thanksgiving. Now, this was about 3 or 4 years ago. And he said, Dad, I've jammed my hip. And he said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to play this week. They had just played the Steelers, and they were about to play New England. He said, I need you to fly up here and work with me. So I flew up that Sunday night, and when I got up there, he could hardly get around.
Yeah.
And so we began to do some things and work on some things. And he would go in and do what he could do with the team. Well, he played through that, and we got him to a point. But I knew he developed compensation to play through that. And I couldn't stay up there, and I had no input because I always, even though I do what I do, I always tried to stay out of the boys' coaching. When they went off somewhere, I always wanted to respect that program. And if there was something I could give them on the side to help alleviate something,
Yeah.
like with Clay, I did that. But the problem, to wrap the story up, he played with movement dysfunction, and they went to the AFC Championship game. And in the AFC Championship game, he blew his ACL out. And I'll always believe it was because of dysfunction that they didn't know how to fix in the training room. And so, to your
Yeah.
question, yeah,
Yeah.
I will always remember that. That's one example. But, life is what it is.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked is because, like, Donnie had a great answer to that when he came on about a couple months back, and he was like, sometimes I'm so itching to do it, but I have to sort of like pull back a little bit at times, because when I'm at home, I'm a father, I'm not a coach, you know what I mean? But when I'm with my athletes, like, it's a different story. I have to separate like that work and that life sort of balance. But
That's a good way to put it.
yeah, obviously, like, I've got so much to ask you, but obviously, I'm not gonna be able to go through everything. This might be
Sure.
like a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast. But I do want to bring up like the neurogenics that you mentioned before we wrap up, because like that's fascinating to me. Like, when I was at school, we learned about, obviously, like the Newell's model of constraints and the action perception coupling. I know they're different to what neurogenics is, but they share similar principles.
Yes, they do.
Right. I think Sean Mishka is a very big component of coach that likes the component of that action perception model coupling. But talk through like the neurogenics, because like obviously that the cognitive aspect, mind body, like that's very appealing to me.
Yeah, and we on our website we delineate between what we call movement neurogenics and athletic neurogenics. It's the same concept. And I saw this I really began looking into it the last 7-8 years of my career in the NFL. And essentially, all you're doing is you're combining simultaneously a brain-body experience with a body-brain experience. And I don't think we're taught in the United States anyway to think along these lines, that there is actually possibly a larger component to the development of athleticism than physical, and that's the cognitive aspect. And what I'm talking about are things like, we've got 14 areas that we focus on and have developed this combination body-brain, brain-body experience to close the loop, because the research is very strong. And here's series to build and develop adaptability. Here's series to build and develop rapid processing of information. Here's a series to develop anticipation. Here's a series to develop sports vision. You could go right down the line with all of the 14 areas. But an example, a very rudimentary example of movement neurogenics are for anyone. And I'm really pushing movement neurogenics toward the 40 plus generation. Because neuroplasticity in the brain, it's very obvious that neurogenesis occurs. And one of the things through experimentation that seems to drive this neuroplasticity and neurogenesis in certain regions of the brain is learning a new movement or a new skill. And so in an early onset beginner neurogenic experience, I'll have people just lightly stand on one leg, and I'll give them a number like 30.
Yeah.
And I say, count down to 0 by 3s while you're balancing. And we do it on the left side and the right side. And as you get more advanced into athletic neurogenesis, you want to, like Philip Rivers was one of the smartest guys I ever coached. And so for some guys, I just set colored cones up and I would dictate a pattern. And I would say, okay, after the second cone, I'm going to change it. So you need to be listening or watching. Well, with Philip, I couldn't use colors because it was too easy. So what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to give you an NFL team. And if there's a purple cone, it's Vikings.
Yeah.
So it depends on the athlete and how advanced they are, that you want to challenge them with these types of experiences. And, I thought neurogenics was a great term to come up with and apply to that. And so that's a huge component of developing athletes. If you're a golfer and you go out and the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour into your face and it's raining, you got to be adaptable with your swing.
Yeah.
And so why hadn't we been doing this all along? And again, I'm not saying this has not been thought about before, because we did this in rehabilitation, focus, capabilities, but they're huge drivers, and they're actually being used now experimentally to treat Alzheimer's and dementia.
Oh, okay.
When we were designed, and I believe we were designed, we were given the capability for the brain to speak to the body, but through things like proprioception. The body drives and speaks back to the brain. And the evolutionary model, and I'm not espousing one side or another, I'm just telling the truth here. The evolutionary model took the body to brain experience away. It's like allopathic medicine. Allopathic medicine is driven by what's called reductionism. And they see the body as a machine. They don't see it as a system. When you guys fix movement dysfunction, you see the body as a system.
Yeah.
Because something going on at the foot may be because of something at the hip or vice versa. And so you have to become a good detective.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at the body as a system, there's a lot of lights that go off that, unfortunately, if we look back at our educational process, we didn't get taught. But there's a lot of good self-learners out there, and I know you're one, and I hope to stay one. And I think that's a key.
We definitely pushing me, that's for sure. But we'll finish up with, we've got like a Wheel of Valor section, if you will, segment to finish up. So we got, I'm going to find it first on my little trusty sheet. Where are we? We got, I think, 10 different little segments. Here we go. Found it on my little cheat sheet. So we got Unsung Heroes, Take the L, History Lessons, Touchdown, Sliding Doors, You Up. I'm sure you've had plenty of lovely women over the years tell you that, ask you that. Hold the Line, Chasing Waterfalls, This Isn't Where I Park My Car, and so you're telling me there's a chance. So basically, don't break this because we know you're jacked and you might you might ruin it. But take a good spin if you can.
All right.
Oh, come on, you can be better than that.
Can I? Well, I don't want to hit the mic.
That's
here.
all right. There we go. Let's see what we land on. Oh, chasing waterfalls. Oh, this is interesting. What's something that makes you cry every time, even if no one's watching? And don't say talking to me.
Something that makes me cry every time.
Even if no one's watching.
Well, it's personal. It goes back to one of my sons, and you know, everybody experiences adversity, but when he was a senior, he was projected to be a second, third round pick. Well, the fifth game of his senior year, he blew his ACL out, and I was on the sideline because I was return to play director. And so I ended up returning to play my own son. But I'll never forget when I can't get this out of my mind, and I'm sure there's a lot of parents, if anybody watches this, that could identify and have much more moving and important things that they've had to deal with. But I went in and he didn't know I was behind him in the locker room. And he knew what had happened. And he'd seen his dream blow up. They ended up getting drafted in the 7th round. But there's a big difference, as you well know. And I watched him take his pads off, and this is a very unemotional kid. He just started shaking. And all I saw was the visible body quakes and shaking of his disappointment. And there's a lot of things. We all fail. I've failed a lot in my life, and you learn from failing. But when you go through it, it's a lot different than when you look at your own flesh and blood, and you can't do anything for them other than go hug them and you know, let them cry it out. That's not the only thing, but I'm not a real emotional person. But that broke me that day. So to answer your question, there, not to be a Debbie Downer, but that's what it was. I'm not movies, nah, you know, all that stuff.
Now, thanks for sharing that. And hey, I'm really glad you're able to come down to Austin and record. DA, you want to bring that book over? We'll give you a book, a little plug. So we got here Aruka, Rebuild and Restore Your Health. Can we see that on the camera? There we go. You can get it from all good and crappy bookstores, as well as online, on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. You know, if somebody's interested in taking a look at a proactive health model that was used in the NFL, that's what that book's about. So
we'll put all the links up to get it all sold. But obviously it's an honor and a privilege to have you here. Obviously, our relationship means a lot to me. So thanks for coming in.
Oh, Mike, I enjoyed it. I thank you guys for having me, and I wish Valor the very best.
Thank you. Let's get some barbecue, baby.